Stephen Vogt is the manager of the year, and the Cleveland Guardians add a coveted coach to their staff. All on today's Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Guardians. I am Jeff Ellis, your host of Locked On Guardians, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Now the number one sports podcast network, as we always say here. Locked On, your team every single day, and that's what Locked On Guardians is. We cover your Cleveland Guardians from the majors, the minors, to the draft, to minor coaching changes, to big coaching changes. If something happens, we have it covered. We're the only podcast that does that as a proud member of the Locked On Podcasting Network. Who am I? I am Jeff Ellis. I've been your host here since 2019. Long time here at Locked On. I've been doing this for 1,600 episodes now. Before that, I was a national writer at Scout and 24/7, focused on prospects and the draft. I want to thank you for making today's episode your first listen today and every day, wherever it is you get podcasts, as well as taking a moment to say thank you to all of the everydayers sticking with us through thick, thin. Apparently, through bullpen discussions was not one of the most recent favorites. So thank you all to everyone who's joining us. And a quick note that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. What are we going to do on today's show? Well, I know I had promised Kenny Lofton trade tree, but we just don't have time. We'll get to it. I have it written down. We're going to tuck it away. It's an evergreen topic. Instead, Stephen Vogt wins Manager of the Year. Let's talk about some history of the award. Let's talk about this franchise's history with the award. Who is Andy McKay? We're going to put that in there. The newest coach of the Cleveland Guardians. Why it's a fantastic hire, in my opinion, and why people should be excited. Second half, we're going to talk qualifying offers. We're going to talk about international imports. And we're going to talk about the idea of a one-year high contract or high salary deal and why it's not quite what people think. And we'll still give you the history. We're going to use some of that talk about qualifying offers to discuss Cleveland Guardians' second-round draft history since the year 2000 and why they should not be precious with their second-rounders. So let's dive in. Stephen Vogt. He wins the Manager of the Year. He becomes Pat Murphy was the third person ever to win consecutive Manager of the Year awards. And about 20 minutes later, Stephen Vogt becomes fourth. The other coaches to do that, former Cleveland coach Kevin Cash, as well as Bobby Cox. Cox did it in 03 and 04. Cash I don't have off the top of my head. This is an award that's been around since 1983. The first winners were Tommy Lasorda and Tony La Russa. And in that whole time for the history of the Manager of the Year award, the first Cleveland manager to win, you might think, oh, it's got to be Hargrove for those 90s teams. Oh, no, it wasn't him. 1996 had two winners, Johnny Oates and Joe Torre. But Hargrove, it's very weird to think he didn't win in 95. Just for the crazy year that team had. It went to Lou Piniella in Seattle. Also had a great year. But yeah, it was the first time I ever went to Eric Wedge in 07. And then Tito won the award 3 times and is currently the leader in the clubhouse. But now Vogt's got 2. I don't know if it moves the needle on anything. I don't, it's definitely we didn't expect award. Like, a year ago, most people didn't expect Cleveland or the Brewers to make the postseason. This year, the Brewers had, they lost multiple players to free agency. They had to incorporate new names. Pat Murphy gets again. Cleveland had basically when they won the division after having the biggest comeback in the modern history of sports, that probably locked up this award. And I'm going to say this, and I've said it on the air before. I know Detroit fans will probably not agree with me and say this is just me trying to make up a narrative. But I don't know, having a historical moment, making the postseason, unless you're going to make the ALCS, I would have winning the division to me was more important than winning one round of the postseason. I didn't get just this move too. Again, it was an amazing to watch. It was a crazy Detroit team that spent most of the year at like a near lock to win the division. So no matter the ups and downs, no matter the concerns I've had at points, others have even bigger concerns at points. I think you don't have that type of comeback unless you are doing a good job. Everything has to be hitting on all cylinders. You have to be managing personalities. You have to be correctly using parts and pieces to get there, overcoming on top of that the loss of 2 starters due to gambling, which you can go back and listen to Monday's episode for. I think it's a deserved win. I saw one Blue Jays fan in our comment who was upset it didn't go to Snyder. Snyder has the 5th highest payroll in baseball, and they nearly choked away the division. Like the postseason doesn't count towards the award. Snyder, I think, deserved to probably be up there, but again, 5th highest payroll in baseball. I think in the American League, only behind the Yankees, right? Because it's the Mets, the Dodgers, the Yankees, and the Phillies. Yeah, 2nd highest payroll in the American League, and they almost choked it away. So to me, I don't think that necessarily makes you manager of the year material. That's just me. Dan Wilson, I think you could make a strong case for more. I think Snyder, to me, is 3rd in this competition. But, congrats to Stephen Vogt. Great for this organization. But let's get in the meat and bones of segment 1. Andy McKay, who I'm going to probably call Adam McKay at some point, is a fascinating hire for the Cleveland Guardians. First off, he's who hired Stephen Vogt to be a bullpen coach for Seattle. So that's where the history is here. Here is a guy who was in their front office and has a long history in coaching. He got to start way back in the summer of 96, which for me means this is before I was starting high school. This is, I'm old enough that this was like between 8th and 9th grade. For me, he was a pitching coach for Chatham. And then he also did some managing with the Anchorage Glacier Pirates back when there was an Alaskan, I guess it was Summer League. Yeah. So he did that for a few months. And then he got the head baseball coach at Sacramento City College. He was there for 13 years as a coach there. Then got hired by the Rockies as a peak performance coordinator, kind of that roving assistant coordinator. Leaves there, becomes the assistant GM, director of player development for the Seattle Mariners. And at points, it looked like he would get a chance to coach. He's always wanted to coach. I think that's a love of his. I mean, it's definitely a love of his. But he was so good in the front office. He was such an important player to them. I'm going to take Joe Doyle, who's always been well connected to the Seattle front office. And his response to this was, wow, McKay is a sizable loss for the Mariners. He's been with the organization for a decade. One of the guys that runs point on evaluating player makeup and player acquisition, big voice in player development internally as well. So they're taking a guy, and I know people are like, great, they got a guy who hasn't coached in forever. He was going to be 2 years ago an on-the-field coach for Seattle. Then they lost someone in their front office. He replaced. He kept just moving up. And he's wanted to coach. He's great at player development, a lot of great things about kind of the mental side of the game and working through things, being a positive source. He, has helped out, even though he's a GM and keeps moving up that track with some coaching when he can. And it's, to me, maybe the most interesting thing is this is a guy who's basically been West Coast only since I was in high school. And he decided to come out here, I think, because that relationship with Vogt, who, again, he is the guy who hired him. That's who reached out and started the process for Vogt to become a coach with Seattle. And this is a loss for Seattle. It's a benefit for Cleveland. On paper, it looks like he, is taking a lower role, but it's the role he wants on a team he wants to be with a coach he wants to coach with, or manager, I should say, he wants to manage with. So getting a guy who's, great at, working with players, who's great at, identifying kind of player makeup and things like that. They're getting a lot here. And to me, this is a fantastic hire. He is supposedly the role that they're creating, or not creating, but he's moving into to a degree of Kai Correa's role. He's called the field coordinator. It's that kind of hybrid. He's not the bench coach. That's what Alvarez was, but Correa did a lot of extra things for the team. And that's going to be McKay as well. Ryan Divish talked about that he was supposed to, that's where I got the information about how he was supposed to have gotten back to being on the field coach a few years ago. And then it just, because of other losses, they could not have him pivot to that role. And you're looking at someone who Seattle didn't want to lose. And it's interesting because often you can't lose guys to a lesser role, but I think it's because that's specifically that coaching role. It's what he wanted to get to. And they also respected his desire. So I did not see this coming. I did not expect them to go out and add him. I didn't think this was a guy who was even on my radar, but I think it's a fantastic hire. I know Justin and I will have a lot more to say about it on tomorrow's show, but if you're curious, who did they add? They added a guy who's done it all at all levels for a long time, who's an instrumental part of another playoff team this past year, who is going to bring some outside ideas and opinions to the Cleveland Guardians. And I don't see how any of those things are not a net positive. When we come back, let's talk about free agency, specifically qualifying offers, international free agents, and those one-year contracts everyone keeps bringing up. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of a game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making a late push. My advice right now, I've been a longtime Blue Jackets fan. If you are as well, you know they have these stretches throughout the history of this organization where they are just awful and can't seem to buy a win. Right now seems to be one of those times. It is frustrating, it is annoying, but maybe you can make some money off of your frustrations. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That is an all-time high. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I want to thank you for joining us here again today on Locked On Guardians. Thank you to all of our insiders. Thank you to everyone who helped make us the #1 sports podcasting network. I have been here long enough that I remember when we were excited to crack the top 5, and now we are #1, and it's kind of amazing. And very proud, put in the time and effort over the last 6 years. And thank you to everyone. Tell me, that's our comment today. How long have you been listening? Let me know in the comments below how many years, months, days you have been listening. I'd be curious. And here's a question. Is there anyone out there exists who has listened to every single one of my episodes? That's what I would love to know. Let me know below. So let's talk free agency, specifically kind of the areas that maybe don't get as much discussion. Let's talk internationally, the idea of the 1-year contract and the qualifying offer. We're going to save that for last because that's going to then move into segment 3 with second round failures. So let's start with the idea of the 1-year deal, because I keep seeing in the comments people being like, let's give Schwarber 1 year, $40 million, or let's give Pete Alonso 1 year, $38 million. Here's the problem with this idea. Those deals, players don't want them. They want long-term contracts. Someone like Schwarber is already 33. He wants a 5-year contract because more than likely they know that by the end of that contract, you're going to get more money than you would have because you're probably going to be on your last legs. Like they all, he just sat there and watched Nick Castellanos is getting paid, $20 million this year when he would be lucky to get $2 million in free agency. And they're looking to this is a last grab for some of these guys. And the whole idea of a 1-year huge money contract for a proven talent is just bogus. It doesn't exist because it never occurs. It never occurs because instead what happens is the pillow contract. And we've seen this to lesser degrees with Cleveland, with Shane Bieber and with Josh Bell. And Josh Bell is a perfect example of why a pillow contract is something that a player who is good enough is going to demand, because he got money that he would have never seen after that bad first year, thanks to that. And if you go and you look like Alex Bregman, I don't know how many people remember at the start of 2024, he was miserable. He was a below league average bat for about a month, maybe a month and a half. And it was not his best year to enter free agency. So he enters, he talks with a lot of organizations. People like the Tigers are trying to buy him cheaply. And he goes and signs what turns into a 1-year, $40 million contract with the Red Sox. But what he signed was a 3-year, and there were deferrals, but, a 3-year, $120 million contract. So it wasn't a 1-year contract. It was, hey, if I am good, I'll opt out. If I am terrible, you're stuck with $40 million next year again. Pete Alonso's contract last year, and Pete Alonso, no one wanted to touch him with a 10-foot pole a year ago. He had declining data for a few years. First base is not valuable on the grand scheme, and he had his own set of struggles. He got his was a $24 million pillow contract for this year. Now, I know what you're saying. I would give him 2 years, $54 million, I think is what it was. Yeah. I mean, I would too. And I think Cleveland would offer him that right now. He's not taking that now. He had a great year. He had a nice bounce back after having that terrible year in 24. You can give 1 year or even pillow contracts to guys like Devin Williams, who I know people, it's funny because even in our discussion yesterday, like talked about that. Do you want to give him a lot of money? Or maybe it was in the comments. Someone's like, he had a bad year. I'm like, he didn't. Like, he had some bad games because the relief, you have so few appearances that it can really shade things. That's why it's important to look at some of those stats like FIP, which stands for fielding independent pitching, which typically is the best indicator of future pitching success. And his is still sub 3. So you're looking through that. Like, those are the guys. There has to be a significant wart to get a 2-year pillow contract, even a 3-year one. And the problem is you can't really afford to give a 3-year contract, because right now, why do they have $40 million in space? Because they haven't done any extensions outside of Bybee and Jose. And no one's in arbitration outside of Kwan. Gavin's going to hit arbitration, I believe, next year. You're going to have this influx, and you're not going to be able to afford a $40 million contract on one player after this year. So this whole idea of giving a 1-year contract, it won't happen. It can't happen because players don't want 1-year contracts. They want security. And 2, no player who's good enough to get that amount of money is going to get a 1-year contract. They're going to get that pillow contract that ensures that if they stink, they still have security. So I think it's just one of those things we have to give up on. I know there's a point in time where it's like, hey, maybe you can get Schwarber at like 2 years, 66 minutes. And now I realize I was dumb. That was I hadn't fully explored and really looked at the market. It's not going to happen. These guys want 5-year contracts who are at the top of the market. Cleveland, where they are, I'm not going to get into the economics debate or battle. It's a bottom 5 market in size, and the Forbes reported value on Dolan is incorrect. So, and that's one of those things, like Zach has said that as well. That's not just us. There's multiple people who have brought that up. So it's a weird situation where they're not going to swim with the big fishes. It's unfortunate. It's the truth of it. But if you can find some medium guys, and I'll talk about that with the qualifying offer, that might be the way to go. I don't want to do the bargain bin. I don't want to do let's try and get 3 positions filled and see how that works. I'm not advocating what they did in the past. I'm also saying that idea of the 1-year big money contract, you can throw that out. Very quickly, the international market, 3 big names in there. Cody Ponce, there's a chance Cody Ponce ends up being the best one in the group. But the one who's getting the most attention, and people have brought up, because Jim Bowden brought up in the article that Cleveland should look at Munetaka Murakami. And then people have said an insider in Japan, and Justin and I did this search. All it is all these things tie back to this Jim Bowden article. Murakami is a terrible gamble. Like, literally the last guy I want this team to chase. And the reason for that is he swings and misses a lot in a league that doesn't have where guys don't swing and miss. And he hit 0.093 on fastballs greater than 93 miles an hour. He hit under 100 on fastballs under 93 miles an hour in Japan, and he's not facing the highest level of fastball over there. Remember all the issues with Roki Sasaki's fastball when he came over here? It was an unhittable pitch in Japan. Over here, he spent some time in AAA because of it. So he faced poor fastballs and couldn't hit them. And then I also want to bring up Byung-ho Park, who a decade ago the Twins signed. They gave $13 million for the right to negotiate with him. They gave him a 4-year, $12 million contract, and he was terrible from the drop. Ends up playing just like 60 games in the big leagues. And what was his problem? Huge slugger in Korea, had a 25% strikeout rate, which was high for the level of the league, struggled with fastballs. That profile, that 25% K rate in a league not known for K rates that high, struggling with fastballs, that is exactly Murakami. And that is why I don't think this team should consider a look at or even go near him. Maybe it'll get to the point where all this data is out there and his value will drop so much it'll make sense to other teams. But also, like, Cleveland hasn't signed. I don't even think they scout over there anymore. They haven't signed a player, even one of these pitchers like Drew Brzezinski or, Cody Ponce this year, or Merrill Kelly, was it Kyle Hart a year ago? They haven't even, Eric Fetty, they haven't gone after one of those players in a long time. So they're not over there looking, but that comes up all the time. We're going to come back, and because this whole idea of the second round history ties into the qualifying offer, we're going to come back in segment 3, talk about why the qualifying offer should not be a scary thing, why the qualifying offer will help the Cleveland Guardians, and why what's really scary is the Cleveland Guardians and the second round on today's Locked On Guardians. NFL season is back, and honestly, there's no better feeling than being in a stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle between queues, login screens, and prices. Jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. And that's why we here at Locked On Guardians use Game Time. The app that gives you the advantage to you. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. That's my favorite thing. I am so tired of the gotcha games where I won't mention competitors, but I've gone and like, oh, I've got this great ticket. This is fantastic. Why is it doubled in price because of fees? Game Time isn't playing the I gotcha game. They're playing the we want to keep you long-term game. Why is Justin not on the show tonight? Why is this the solo episode instead of my typical Sunday evening one? Because he used Game Time to buy Jonas Brothers tickets for his wife. I know he goes to a lot of his like Cavs games, Game Time. Any event that Justin is at where I'm doing a solo show, you can thank Game Time for that. So right now, download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Teams apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Thank you all for joining me. I hope you're enjoying the show. Again, I apologize that the promised Kenny Lofton trade tree couldn't be here today. It is 2 full pages, especially if you count the 07 trade back to Cleveland, which I did in my research. So it's too much. I need 2 segments for it, honestly. We will get to it. I know I promised it. Instead, let's talk about the qualifying offer, why this is good for Cleveland in general, and then also why we shouldn't be afraid of it. So a few years ago, they changed the rule to the qualifying offer. So teams no longer lose first rounders. And if you were the Cleveland Guardians, when there is a qualifying offer, they would lose their 3rd highest pick, and that's it. They don't lose international money. They don't lose a secondary pick. Like a team like, I think the Yankees lose their 2nd highest pick, their 5th highest pick, and like $1 million. It's something, high like that. It's a pretty noticeable thing you would lose. But Cleveland, being the size that they are, so yeah, for Cleveland, they're losing their 3rd highest pick. If they signed 2 of these guys like they did back in the day with Swisher and Bourne, and that cost them their comp pick and their 1st rounder, no, that's not how it works today. Now they lose their 3rd and 4th highest pick, so they're not losing much. And I would actually argue last year was the better year to do it, because when you have the comp B pick, that's what you would lose in your 2nd rounder. This year, because they are going to have a comp A pick, they would lose their 2nd round pick. We'll get into a second why that's not a big deal. Now, a year ago, they were apparently very deep in the discussions with Nick Pivetta, who went to the Padres and had a fantastic year. And it's one of those things that kind of came out after the fact that we didn't realize at the time. And it would have been a smart gamble. Like, one of the reasons that I believe they had that money to spend, why they went out and got Seawalds and got the Dukes, and that was like $11.5 million right there, is because of on Pivetta. Like, they tried to figure a way to kind of roll their money together and Nick Pivetta a year ago. And unfortunately for them, he went to the Padres and he had a really weird contract. That's what I'm trying to pull up here super quickly. That he had he got $1.75 million last year. He got nothing last year to the Padres. And then he gets $19 million this year. So essentially he got a 2-year, $20 million contract. And then he can opt out the next 2 years. One is at $15 million, $18 million, very likely to opt out. So Cleveland was chasing him. And I don't know if it was a preference to pitch in the National League, if it was a preference in terms of, San Diego is a pretty cool place to live type of situation. Pivetta himself is a Canadian, so I don't think it's about the cold. But yeah, Cleveland was chasing him. It didn't happen. He goes to San Diego, and it's fantastic for them. But we know they weren't scared off a year ago. And again, that makes sense because they actually acquired another competitive balance pick. And you're looking at who they would have lost last year. I mean, and that was who they took, or Hines. It's not the highest value selection. So I think that there is still a world where Trent Grisham makes sense, right? That they're not going to be afraid of a pick like this. If they decide to chase a guy like Torres, who got the qualifying offer, who they were in on a year ago, it could make sense. I don't think the qualifying offer is a big bad. I don't think you look at this and say, maybe they try to get a Michael King on the cheap, right? See if he can rebound and become a valuable player for them. There's none of these guys. If they're going to sit in the weeds, don't get me wrong, they're not going to jump out and chase down these guys with the qualifying offer. But they're going to try to do what they tried to do a year ago with Nick Pivetta and wait and see. And then if these guys become available, you jump and you try to make a contract that makes sense for both sides, where you do get something like 2 years, and then they get, because just about it was a guarantee, like I said, that it was just so little last year. And then, a lot of security because there's another 15 and 19 million essentially. So he's another 34 million. He's probably not going to get, but if he hurt his arm or something else, it gave him security to do that. And I have a feeling Cleveland probably lost out because they maybe weren't willing to go 4 years deep. Maybe we're more willing to do 3. But I know the typical thought process is Cleveland won't go for a Trent Grisham now. I'm just saying this so people can kind of sit back and understand why I think that the qualifying offer doesn't hurt them. Let's talk second round history. So since 2000, Cleveland has had 13 second rounders make the majors. You might be thinking, hey, that's not bad. That's 13 out of 25, right? Well, they've actually had 35 second rounders since 2000. So when you're looking at 13 out of 35, I didn't do the math, but that's, roughly a third, right? 33%. League average since 2000 is 50%. So second round has just been a bad round. Jason Kipnis, best since 2000. Then Stephen Wright. Then Nolan Jones, Nick Sandlin, Parker Messick already at 5, Nick Allen, Brian Tallett, Andrew Walters, Joshua Rodriguez, Brian Slocum at 10, Doug Nikhazy at 11, 12, Tyler Freeman, and 13, Matt McBride. In the history of the organization, Albert Bell is the best second-round pick they've ever had. The other guys in the top 5 with him and Kipnis are Neil Heaton, John Farrell, and I'm blanking on who the 5th member of that club is. I believe Heaton is 3rd and Farrell's 5th, and I'm just having a complete blank out. I didn't think I needed to write it down because I remember. But it's been arguably their worst round of a high-value round. So the fact that this year with a qualifying offer, they would lose that pick, I don't think should be a detriment because the second round is the round of death for Cleveland. Like I said, Logan Allen is 6th since 2000, and he's been an up and down guy for most of this time. Walters didn't even play this year and barely pitched last year. He's already has your 8th highest WAR. That's how bad this has been. And this is a team that's had a lot of high second round picks and has spent a lot of money on second round picks. They've had a lot of second round busts. The highest paid second rounders, Alex Clemmie currently has the highest bonus. I'm not sure if I had the pause there, but Alex Clemmie, highest bonus. Nolan Jones 2, Jacob Cozart 3, Dylan Howard, worst draft pick in franchise history, number 4. Dean Curley this past year 5. Dylan Howard, we've talked about a few times on the show. 4th highest bonus. I believe that was the Lindor draft, and he never even made it out of Arizona. Had suspensions, had other things. It was a mess. The other top 5 second rounder was Sean Casey. And one of the things that when I was doing some research is, about 20 to 25% of players should be 5 WAR or better in the second round on average. And when you're looking at that as a kind of an entry point, the 20 to 25% of first rounders since 2000 are solid or regular. Cleveland's had 6 total in the history of their franchise. Sean Casey is 3rd. 6th is Herbert Perry. So since 2000, they've had 1. Not 25%, 1. So it is those high paid players I mentioned, that's not a strong list either. And when you're going through, yes, we could also talk about that it gets, every year the cost increase. So it is going to be shaded towards recent picks. But even, Trey Haley is high on this list. It was a pretty big bust for them. Levon Washington is top 10. This is not a strong list. We can talk about the development side of things, but bottom line, it's one thing to lose back when you'd lose a first rounder. When you lose a potential pick in the top 30, that's a big loss. when it is a second rounder for an organization that can't find water falling out of the boat in the second round, and I think this front office does a magnificent job. I get called a stand for this front office. I get called, holding water for them. I just think they do a fantastic job. I believe, I trust them implicitly. I think they do a great job. But the second round, it's not just this front office, it's the entire history of this organization. You've got Bell, you got Kipnis, you got Sean PC3, and then I understand most fans don't know who Neil Heaton is. I know some of you guys who like the history will appreciate that. Or, John Farrell, most fans might know more as his manager and not as a pitcher. So it's been a real ugly round for them. And this is my roundabout way of saying they are producing so far below expectation that it shouldn't matter if they lose the second round pick. I mean, I love the draft, so I always want more picks from that perspective, because I say Cleveland isn't a sports town, it's a draft town. I am a child of the 80s and 90s where everyone was bad all the time. It felt like you only had drafts to get excited about. But saying that, if they lose a second round pick this year because they signed Trent Grisham to a 3-year contract to opt out, I'm going to be happy. I'm not going to worry about that loss at all. Neither should you. Thank you all for joining me. I hope you enjoyed a touch of history, even if it wasn't the expected history. It's fun to look at the coaching changes. Again, I think Andy McKay is a huge get. That's a guy that Seattle didn't want to lose. It is a guy who brings a lot of different facets to this team. Manager of the Year award is what it is. It's not my favorite thing, but if you love it, more power to you. International free agents, avoid Murakami. Look at those guys with qualifying offers, especially if they have to stick around on the market because people are afraid to lose, international money. I think last year was a specific situation where some of the bigger market teams were afraid of losing that international money more than ever due to the Sasaki situation. So maybe they won't care as much this year. We'll have to wait and see. But if teams get a little too precious, I think Cleveland should not be afraid to jump. Thank you all for joining us. Remember, rate and review, download daily. It helps. Again, tell me how long you've been listening and or watching the show, or give me both. And thank you all. And go Guardians, go.